Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 359 chainsaw. Customer complaint is that it hasn't run in 2 years. Well, we're looking in the fuel tank right now to see if it's got 2-year-old fuel in it. And, I mean, it doesn't smell bad. It's not offending. Let's see if it runs. Choke feels a little wonky, but seems like it's working. Yeah, it's not going to run. I mean, look at this fuel running right out of the exhaust on the muffler. What did I pull it? 6, 8, 10 times, whatever it was, and we got fuel coming out the exhaust. So it's flooding. And usually, if something's been sitting for 2 years and now it's flooding, the problem is a stiff metering diaphragm holding the metering lever open, thus holding the needle off the seat, and you have a flooding condition. Other potential reasons for this could be just a piece of schmutz underneath the needle valve. Let's see if we got spark. That could be another reason. I don't know if you could see that or not, but we did have spark. So let's look into the fuel system on this one. We're going to dump that fuel out of the tank and see exactly what it looks like. So there's definitely oil in this fuel. Fuel looks a little bit dark. Is it dark because he's got a lot of oil in it? Or is it dark because it's older fuel? It doesn't smell bad. Kind of hard to say. Let's get this fuel filter out of here and take a look at that. Now, I don't suspect there being any problem with the filter or the fuel hose. And the reason I say that is it's moving plenty of fuel. I mean, we got it coming out the muffler, right? Let's pressure test the line, though. It's just part of my routine. I'm going to put 10 pounds of pressure on here and see if it holds. And it looked like it was holding. So we think that the fuel line is good, and we're just going to put a fresh filter on here. The end of that hose has got a bit of a memory to it, probably because the original filter was still on there. So I cut the end off and put a new filter on it. All right. Gonna do a little bit of house cleaning here. Because if that carb's coming off, we want to keep that whole area kind of clean. Trying to decide if I'm going to replace the plug or not. You see all that fuel that blew out of there when I put the air in and started pulling on the cord? Trying to dry it out in there a little bit. So here's our throttle linkage. There's a little wire that holds that piece of linkage in place. I move the wire off to the side. We need a little jack stand for our chainsaw. So I move that wire off to the side, and then I can grab the throttle rod itself and pull it out of the holder on the side of the carburetor. And then the rod just pulls right out of the trigger handle. Alright, we removed our jack stand. Hey, check this out. This is a tool I made after watching one of Erica's. Erica's got a channel called Married with Small Engines. She was showing a steel fuel hose removal tool. Well, I like making tools. And when I saw that tool, I thought I could make something at least as good. So what you saw there was a a piece of stainless tubing, which was actually the inner drive shaft from a Husqvarna string trimmer. And I just kind of custom ground the end so that I could grab a fuel line and pry it off a carburetor. And then pushed I think in that case I pushed a Craftsman handle on it. So that was, cost me nothing to make that tool. I can only imagine Steel must be getting Snap-on prices for their tools. Not that I'm a stranger to paying Snap-on prices. So as you saw, we removed the carburetor. And now we're cleaning it up. And we're going to open it up. We're going to put it on our carburetor stand. This stand is something you can find a link to in the description of this video. So inside the carburetor, looking at the micro screen, it looked alright. Nothing wrong with that. No debris in it. Let's take the metering diaphragm cover off of the carburetor and see what it looks like underneath here. So that metering diaphragm is not, brittle or anything, but it is stiff. You can see it kind of holds a memory when you move it. And if it's held in the position where it's holding open the needle valve, then that could create our flooding condition. There's still the potential for the needle itself to be the culprit. And we'll look at that here in a minute. So we're just kind of dumping our carb kit out on the rag here. Let's remove, or at least loosen, the screw that holds the metering lever in place. Slide the pin out, lift the lever out, drop it on the bench. And I'm examining the needle right now. And it has some wear in it. There's a ridge line you can see in the rubber of the needle itself. So between the stiffer metering diaphragm and the condition of that needle, I'm sure that's where we're getting our flooding from. So now I'm taking the new needle and I'm just cleaning it up. I like to clean them up before I install them. Sometimes there's what appears to be a preservative on the rubber tip of the needle. So we'll load the needle into the metering lever. We'll put the cross shaft in the metering lever. The spring is in the carburetor, and we just drop the lever on top of the spring with the needle going down into the hole. While holding it in place, we'll slide the cross shaft over and then screw it down into place. Now I'm checking the metering lever height. In this case, it should be flush with the sides of the carb. Just using that razor blade as a straight edge. Now we're going to put the new gaskets and metering diaphragm on the carb. If you take a look at these gaskets, at first glance they appear the same. But if you look close, that one's got one hole and that one's got two holes. We need the one with the two holes to go down first. I've opened these things up after someone's had a problem with the rebuild and found that the gaskets were mixed up, creating a running issue. So this is where the other gasket's gonna go, on the top of this plate. So a little bit of schmutz on there we want to clean up. And you'll notice there's a little tab on those gaskets. The tabs always go in the same direction. So let's screw this thing down. You don't have to crank these screws in, but when you have a stack like this with that plastic spacer in there. You gotta be a little bit more careful about cranking them in even so you get a good seal. Alright, on the fuel pump side, we have the Teflon fuel pump, which is the brown one. This is the better pump. We're going to remove our micro screen and put the new one in. I mean, if it's clean, you really don't have to. Make sure that it's clean and there's not some kind of scum over the top of it. So I have seen these things where they look good until you look really close and then you can see that something, whether it be a water type of scum or something, is blocking them and preventing fuel flow. Which again, in the case of this carburetor, is not the problem because we got plenty of fuel flowing right out the exhaust. We'll put the pump diaphragm plate in place and screw it down. And that's all we're going to do to the carburetor. You notice I didn't do anything with the high and the low speed jets. I already know I got fuel flowing through there. So putting this back together, I'm going to put the air filter holder with the screws in place and then snap the choke rod on the carburetor. Now we can lay the whole thing in the tray here. Getting my stop switch oriented a little bit. That spring, stainless spring for the stop kind of popped out of place. And that's the way it goes back in. Alright, now we're laying the carb down in here. Where the choke lever is, you got to get that on the right side of the orange plastic upright. So everything fits in there decent. We'll get the screws started here. There we go. Now there's a little rubber tab. You'll see better when I do this side. There we go. That air filter holder has got a knob on it that fits in that rubber tab. That's a fuel line we have there. We're pushing it onto the carburetor. Now I'm going to do the final torque on the two screws that hold the carburetor in. I don't want to get carried away with this because they're going into plastic, so we don't want to strip them. Alright, here's our throttle rod, and there's a rubber boot. The rubber boot's got some grooves in it that slide down into the orange housing of the machine. We're pushing the plastic end of the rod into the trigger handle. Then we're lining up the rod with the catch on the carburetor, and we're going to push the little wire holder over the end of the rod and down behind the, I guess once you're looking at it you'll see where it goes, but kind of locks in behind that tab. Now we'll get that rubber boot done in the place where it belongs. Little function check here. Looks like it works pretty good. Alright, we're going to tighten down the spark plug. I think that was the original plug. I don't think I swapped it out, did I? I don't see an old plug sitting on the table. No, that must be the original plug that it showed up here with. We weren't sure about the quality of his fuel, so we're going to put our own mix in there. Alright, we're getting about ready for a test run. And if it starts, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 359 chainsaw that had sat for a couple years and needed a carb kit. Thanks for watching. Later.